They locked me out of the house I bought. My clothes, my laptop, even my toothbrush, dumped like trash on the front lawn. Brent looked me dead in the eye and said, "This isn't your home anymore." His mother smirked from the window like she'd won a prize. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I smiled, because neither of them knew I still held the deed, and that was just the beginning. You think this is about revenge? No. This is about rewriting the rules they thought they controlled. Watch closely. I never play fair. I play to win. The plane landed 2 hours late. Jessica's phone buzzed with notifications she ignored, her mind focused on getting home, taking a hot shower, and sleeping in her own bed. The week-long legal seminar in Chicago had drained her, but it had been worth it. A deal closed, a future secured. Or so she thought. Her Uber slowed in front of the house. It looked exactly the same. The porch light glowed softly, casting warm shadows on the brick facade. But something tugged at her nerves. The flower pots were gone, and her key didn't fit. She tried again, turned it left, then right. Nothing. The lock had been changed. Confused, she stepped back. That's when she saw it. Her suitcase, her laptop bag, a pile of her clothes, neatly folded, absurdly so, stacked beside the doormat. A toothbrush poked out from the side of a transparent toiletry case like a white flag. The front door creaked open. Brent stood there, arms crossed, wearing the navy t-shirt she'd bought him last Christmas. "This isn't your home anymore," he said, voice flat. Jessica blinked. "What are you talking about? You weren't around. We made a decision." "We?" Doris appeared behind him, hands folded like she was about to say grace. Her voice dripped honey. "We've been patient, Jessica, but we have to prioritize family now, real loyalty, not someone who spends more time in courtrooms than at dinner." Jessica's heart didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. Instead, everything inside her slowed, like the still moment before glass shatters. "You changed the locks?" she asked. Brent shrugged. "You haven't been present. It's best if you take some space." "Space," she repeated. "In the form of a sidewalk?" Doris gave a pitying smile. "You're a smart girl. You'll land on your feet." Jessica picked up her suitcase and stepped back. Not one neighbor came outside, but she felt them, watching through blinds behind curtains. This neighborhood always loved a quiet scandal. Brent's voice called after her, not cruel, not kind, just final. "We'll forward any important mail." She didn't turn around. At the hotel, she opened her phone. No notifications from Brent, none from Doris. But the bank app wouldn't log in. Her email returned a 403 error. Access denied. She laughed. Once. Not because it was funny, but because it was almost elegant. How precise they'd been. Locked her out of the house, cut her off from their shared accounts, severed her from the company email. The trap was so clean, it had to be premeditated. Brent always did prefer digital warfare over confrontation. Still, she didn't cry. She closed her laptop slowly, sat back against the bed's padded headboard, and stared at the ceiling. The hotel room smelled like bleach and lemon. What was she supposed to feel? Rage? Betrayal? Maybe later. Now? She felt something else. A quiet, almost clinical curiosity. She opened her password manager, recovered access to a backup email. From there, she retrieved her personal financial files. Her name was still on the deed. Of course it was. 2 years ago, Brent had begged her to buy the house in her name. His credit wasn't great, he said. It was temporary, he said. But now, that temporary oversight was going to be the hinge on which everything would swing. Jessica clicked through old messages, backed up security footage, saved voice memos. Doris had once left a voicemail about putting Jessica in her place. It had made Jessica roll her eyes then. Now it made her smile. She created a folder labeled Operation Curtain, because that's what this was. A performance. A theater of false virtue. Brent and Doris thought they were writing the final act, but they hadn't even finished the first scene. They underestimated her. That was their first mistake. Jessica looked in the mirror and straightened her posture. The face staring back was calm, calculated, not defeated. They thought she lost. She was just watching the curtain fall. The hotel room was cold, not in temperature, but in texture, sterile, impersonal. But that suited Jessica. Emotions were for people who didn't know how to weaponize facts. She wrapped a robe around her, opened her laptop, and started drawing blueprints, not for a house, but for war. First, the deed. She accessed the county registry. Her name was there. Clear, clean, unchallenged, no co-signers, no liens. Brent had insisted she hold the title just for a while, back when his credit score hovered somewhere between sad and disqualified. Second, the mortgage, also hers, paid regularly. Brent had never even bothered to look at the statements. Third, the paper Doris had pushed across the dinner table last year. Something about family emergency and temporary rights to manage household decisions. Jessica had smiled, taken it, and, before signing, scanned and retyped the document with subtle revisions. Nothing illegal, just enough to ensure it wasn't enforceable. They had underestimated a lawyer's obsession with fine print. She poured a glass of water, reviewed the footage from the home's security system, her system, which auto-synced to her cloud. Brent had forgotten that part. The outdoor camera caught them dragging her suitcase out. Doris laughed as Brent fumbled with the new lock. No attempt to hide what they were doing. She extracted the clip, saved it in a new folder. Assets. Public use. Underneath it, she added the voicemail Doris had left a month ago, complaining about Jessica's coldness, swearing that if Jessica didn't act like a real wife, she'd find herself on the curb. Jessica smiled without humor. Doris had always liked metaphors. Now she'd get to live in one. She checked her accounts. The joint bank login still refused her, but she didn't panic. She had a personal savings account Brent didn't know about, one she never touched, the emergency fund. This wasn't an emergency. This was ignition. She reached out to an old friend, Lena Morris, journalist, independent, ruthless when chasing power abusers. Jessica hadn't spoken to her in years, not since law school, but the bond had never needed upkeep. They had always understood each other. Same fire, different weapons. Lena picked up on the second ring. "Jess, I need 10 minutes of your time, off the record, for now." "You sound dangerous." Jessica chuckled. "That's because I am." They met the next day in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Jessica laid it out. The lockout, the digital freeze, the psychological warfare. Lena didn't interrupt, just listened, eyes sharp, fingers idle beside her untouched espresso. When Jessica finished, Lena asked one question. "Do you want justice or spectacle?" Jessica didn't hesitate. "Both." That night, Lena helped her craft a post. It wasn't legal. It wasn't petty. It was storytelling. A Trojan horse of truth. The blog title read, "They locked me out of the house I bought." No names, no revenge, just a chilling, matter-of-fact account of events. The subtle horror of it all. The way silence wrapped around betrayal, like lace. How a husband and his mother had decided to exile a woman from her own home, and how they thought they'd get away with it. Jessica posted it anonymously at first, but after an hour she added her name. It exploded in 12. The comments started pouring in, women sharing their own experiences, wives erased from mortgages, daughters silenced by family hierarchy, single mothers tricked into giving up assets for the good of the marriage. The blog was reposted on feminist pages, Reddit threads, even LinkedIn. By morning, it had reached 300,000 views. By afternoon, Brent's company's official page was flooded with one-star reviews. Someone had dug up Doris's teaching past and posted a recording of her berating a student in a condescending tone. The internet wasn't justice. It was judgment on steroids. Jessica didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She watched. Because she knew this wasn't victory. It was positioning. She released the second post 2 days later, a calm breakdown of property law focused on how women often relinquish legal power out of trust, and how easy it is for that trust to be weaponized. This time, she included screenshots, redacted bank forms, snippets of the deed, a still from the camera footage. It was surgical. She didn't need to accuse. She only needed to illuminate. The third post? That was the strike. It detailed the psychological pattern of covert narcissism in familial structures, how manipulation hides behind caretaking, how control is dressed up as love, how exiling someone from their home becomes a performance, not a solution. Doris's friends, many of them old school teachers, began reaching out, some confused, some furious, a few supportive. Jessica didn't reply. She wasn't the victim in a story. She was the author. Brent sent a single email through his work account. "Can we talk?" Jessica archived it without opening. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. Brent stood at the podium, face set in practiced anguish. The company's conference room had been converted into a press stage, its neutral backdrop now emblazoned with the firm's branding. Cameras rolled. Employees sat stiffly in rows. A few journalists clutched notepads. Jessica watched it unfold on her hotel room TV, remote resting on her knee. He began with gratitude, for support, for understanding, for the chance to speak candidly during a difficult time. Then the pivot. His voice softened, eyes lowering as he spoke of betrayal. "My marriage," he said, "has gone through its share of strain, but I never expected to be the victim of manipulation." He said it softly, like a bruise. Jessica smirked. He framed himself as the confused husband, the provider, the man misled by a partner too ambitious, too distant. He didn't name her, of course, but he didn't have to. The audience was already drawing lines. Lena texted, "You ready?" Jessica replied, "Drop it." Within seconds, the clip went live. It wasn't long, just 47 seconds. A home security recording. Doris standing in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, talking to someone off camera, the housekeeper from the context. Her voice was unmistakable. So was the sneer. "She walks around like she owns the place," Doris said, swirling her wine. "All that education, all those suits. You know what I call women like her? Trash with a law degree." The internet caught fire. Someone stitched the clip into Brent's press conference, overlaying his somber speech with Doris's mocking tone. The juxtaposition was brutal. Hashtags surged, memes bloomed. Suddenly, Brent wasn't the wronged husband. He was the enabler, the son of entitlement. Investors began to withdraw, quietly at first, then loudly. A public spreadsheet appeared online, tracking shareholder exits in real time. Jessica didn't post a thing. She didn't need to. The engine was already running. What she did do was prepare. The court summons arrived 3 days later, not from her, but from Brent. He was trying to challenge the property title, claiming Jessica had fraudulently gained ownership through undue influence. She laughed when she read it. Classic move. Frame the woman as manipulative, the man as duped. She showed up in court wearing a charcoal gray suit, no jewelry, no makeup, clean, unapologetic. She stood straight when her name was called, met the judge's gaze without hesitation. Brent looked tired. His lawyer looked bored. Doris sat behind him in a maroon coat, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room like she expected applause. The judge asked Jessica to present her position. She didn't monologue. She submitted documents, the deed, the mortgage, the bank transfers, all logged under her name. Then she pulled out the modified agreement Doris had once pushed across the dinner table. "I was asked to sign this under pressure," Jessica said calmly. "I signed a version, but not this one." Brent's lawyer objected, claiming forgery. Jessica handed over a USB. "On this drive is a video, Doris explaining in her own words how she pressured me to sign a complicated form. She laughs. She brags. She admits no one would understand it but her." The judge looked skeptical until Jessica played the clip. There was Doris seated at brunch with a friend, recorded on Jessica's phone. "I gave her some legalese, you know," Doris said, chuckling. "She didn't even blink, just signed it. I told Brent, that's the trick, sweetie. Make it look official and they won't question it." Doris leapt to her feet in court. "That was taken out of context." The judge held up a hand. "You admit that's your voice." Doris hesitated. "Yes, but..." "Then it is not out of context. It is evidence." Jessica turned to Brent. His face had gone pale. The judge tapped a few notes on the screen. "This court recognizes the deed as valid and binding. The house belongs solely to Mrs. Miller." Jessica didn't smile. She simply nodded. "And regarding the claim of undue influence," the judge added, "the burden of proof lies with the plaintiff, which, frankly, has not been met." Brent's lawyer mumbled something about reconsideration. The judge ignored him. "As of this ruling, Mr. and Mrs. Miller are to vacate the premises immediately unless invited by the rightful owner. Any attempt to access the property without consent will be considered trespassing." Doris stood again, indignant. "This isn't justice. She tricked us." The judge turned to her. "Ma'am, I have video evidence of you admitting to deception. I suggest you remain seated." Jessica walked out of the courtroom alone, not triumphant, not smug, just finished. Behind her, the sound of Brent calling her name echoed down the marble corridor. She didn't stop. He had nothing left to offer, no power left to wield. The house was hers. But that wasn't the win. The win was this. The narrative wasn't theirs anymore. It was hers, and she wasn't done telling it. The morning was quiet, almost apologetic. Jessica stood in front of a nursing home, the kind with faded siding and plastic flowers near the door. She hadn't planned this visit, hadn't told anyone. But something about recent events, Doris's arrogance, Brent's betrayal, had stirred something deeper. Not rage, something colder, older. The receptionist pointed her to the recreation room. Her father was there, sketching trees with a dull pencil on hotel napkins. He looked thinner, smaller, but still had the same careless hands, the same distracted tilt of the head. When he noticed her, his eyes widened, not in joy, but in calculation. "Jessica," he said, trying on a smile. "Didn't expect..." She raised a hand. "Don't, just don't." He looked down. "I heard about your husband." She ignored the bait. "You remember why you left?" A pause. "Things were complicated. You left Mom with rent due and a daughter starting school. I thought she'd manage." Jessica leaned against the doorframe. "You know what the worst part is? Not that you left, that you made it look normal, like it was just something men did when life got heavy." He said nothing. She took a breath. "I thought Brent was different. He smiled more, cooked on Sundays, said all the right things. But when the power dynamic shifted, he snapped into something familiar." Her father winced. "I made mistakes." "No, you set patterns." She folded her arms. "But I broke them." For the first time, he looked afraid. Not of her, but of what she'd become. A mirror he didn't want to look into. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "I'm not here for closure. I'm here because I needed to see the origin story, so I never write it again." Later that week, Jessica met with her former professor, now a judge on the state circuit. Over coffee, she pitched an idea, a legal education program specifically for women in at-risk marriages, contracts, property rights, prenups, protection. "You're not trying to make every woman distrust their spouse?" the judge asked. Jessica's eyes didn't flinch. "I'm trying to make sure trust is never the only thing they're holding." He smiled, nodding. "I'll fund your pilot if you teach the first class yourself." She did. She called it Legal First Aid. The first session was packed. Meanwhile, the email from Brent arrived. Apologetic, careful, punctuated with phrases like, "took time to reflect" and "not who I want to be." She didn't delete it. She replied with a PDF. Divorce papers drafted, signed, ready. At the bottom, she added a note. This will be final upon confirmation of your attendance in 6 sessions with men rebuilding integrity. Proof of completion required. An hour later, he replied, I accept. She didn't smile, just forwarded the confirmation to her lawyer. Then came the call from Doris's doctor. Early signs of vascular dementia, disorientation, personality shifts. He wanted to discuss possible guardianship. Jessica declined. She has a son, she said. Let him figure out the rest. But even as she said it, she remembered something. A moment, blurry but real. Doris, years ago, before the venom, holding Jessica's hand during a thunderstorm, whispering, You don't have to be brave every minute, just enough to get through the door. Jessica had believed her. That memory didn't erase the damage, but it reminded her. Even weapons used to hurt were once held gently. Still, she didn't visit. Justice didn't require proximity. It required clarity. And Jessica, for the first time in her life, saw everything clearly. The stage was warm under the lights. Jessica adjusted the lapel mic and took a breath, scanning the rows of faces in the auditorium. Behind her, the TEDx logo glowed red against black. She had rehearsed this talk 27 times, knew every beat, every pause, but nothing prepared her for the weight of silence right before the first word. I bought a house. My husband locked me out of it. Gasps, soft, controlled, expected. She told the story not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as an architect. She spoke of contracts, loopholes, weaponized charm. She didn't cry. The audience did. She ended on a line she'd rewritten a dozen times. We don't need to be saved. We need to be informed. The applause was thunderous. Backstage, hands shook hers. Business cards pressed into her palm. Interview offers, publishing deals. A woman whispered, You said what I couldn't. Jessica smiled politely, then slipped away before the lights cooled. She flew home that night, landing in an empty house with high ceilings and quiet walls. Her voice echoed when she asked the smart speaker to turn on the lights. There was no one to answer. No one to laugh at the dramatic reverb. No one to say, Babe, you're being weird again. Jessica placed her purse on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and stood in the middle of the living room. The walls still smelled faintly of lavender and lemon oil. She'd had them cleaned after Brent left. But memory didn't fade as easily as scent. Trophies lined the shelves, awards from legal organizations, framed photos from women's rights panels, and the TEDx plaque, shiny and crimson, stood on the coffee table like a crown. She stared at it. I won the war, she whispered. But where's the home? The silence answered her, not with anger, but with hollowness. She'd spoken on stages, advised judges, led workshops. But somewhere between defending others and dismantling systems, she had misplaced herself. Love hadn't come back, not in any form she could trust. Men looked at her with admiration, but not intimacy. She was intimidating, too composed, too together. One date had ended with a man saying, You don't need anyone. That's hard to be around. She hadn't argued. Later that week, over lunch with Nina, an old friend from undergrad, Jessica confessed the truth. Not the legal facts, the emotional ones. I feel like I burned the whole field down. Now I don't know how to plant anything. Nina stirred her iced tea. Jess, you've always been the one fixing things, for everyone. Maybe it's time to stop. Jessica looked away. I don't know how to be anything else. Nina leaned in, voice soft but sharp. You can't just live to fix the world. You have to live to live. That sentence stuck. For days, it echoed between Jessica's ears louder than applause ever had. One morning, she walked through every room of the house, noticed how untouched it all felt, how curated, like a museum of triumphs, not a home. She paused in the bedroom. Brent's side of the closet still had a faint outline where his suits once hung. The floorboards near the window still creaked, something he always meant to fix, never did. She realized she didn't hate him anymore. But she also didn't want to live in a monument to what she survived. She opened her laptop, contacted a real estate agent, scheduled a valuation. The house sold in 6 days. On moving day, she didn't cry. She packed in silence methodically. The only thing she left behind was a Post-it note on the bathroom mirror. 3 words written in blue ink. "You don't stay." She booked a small rental on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, a garden, wooden floors that creaked no matter where you stepped. But it didn't matter. It wasn't about the space. It was about the air. She could breathe again. No ghosts. No echoes. Just space to remember who she was. Before the war, before the strategies, before the stage. Not Jessica the lawyer, not Jessica the icon, just Jessica. The cabin sat on the edge of a cedar grove, its roof slanted like a shrug and its porch wrapped in quiet. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't have granite countertops or smart mirrors, but it had silence, an air that smelled of pine and fresh soil. It had no echoes of arguments, no traces of slammed doors or whispered ultimatums, just trees, space, and possibility. Jessica lit the wood-burning stove each morning, brewed her coffee by hand, and walked the trail behind her home before sunrise. The world out here had its own language, one without deadlines or declarations. The dog had come from a shelter upstate, a wiry shepherd mix with eyes too serious for a creature that chased moths. Jessica named her Scout after the only literary heroine who ever made sense to her. Loyal, independent, honest. Scout didn't care about Jessica's accolades. She curled up at her feet when she wrote, nudged her hand when the words slowed, and barked at shadows like they were debts she wouldn't let Jessica carry alone. The writing started slow, 1 paragraph, then another. The title came first, clear as a verdict, "Don't Let Them Hold the Key." Jessica didn't write it as a memoir. Not really. It wasn't about Brent, or Doris, or betrayal. It was about systems and silences, about the quiet ways women were trained to yield and the louder ways they learned to reclaim. She wrote in long stretches, breaking only to chop wood or make soup. Her phone stayed off most of the day. The world would wait. The work wouldn't. By winter, the book was done. Her agent read the manuscript in 1 sitting and called it 3 a.m. "It's not just good," she said breathlessly. "It's seismic." The publisher moved fast. Cover design, printing, pre-orders. They launched with a limited run. It sold out in 48 hours. The second run tripled. National coverage followed. Interviews, op-eds, reading groups, social media campaigns. The phrase, "Don't let them hold the key," became more than a title. It became a mantra, a tattoo, a quiet rebellion spoken over coffee between sisters, whispered during divorce consultations, tucked into graduation speeches. But Jessica didn't tour with the book. She declined the press junkets, the TV spots. Instead, she agreed to 5 signings. Just 5. 1 in each time zone, all independent bookstores. No cameras, no red carpets. The final signing took place in a shop tucked inside a restored firehouse in Portland. The air smelled of espresso and old paper. The line wrapped around the block. Jessica sat at a reclaimed wood table, pen in hand. Most readers didn't say much, just smiled, thanked her, maybe shared 1 line they underlined. But then came a woman in her 30s, slim, soft-spoken, with a wedding band still on her finger. She slid the book across, then leaned in. "Because of you," she said quietly, "I didn't file for divorce in silence." Jessica looked up. The woman's eyes shimmered, but she wasn't crying. She was steady. "I told my story, out loud. I left and I didn't apologize for it." Jessica signed her name, then paused. She met the woman's gaze, held it. "You were never meant to be quiet," she said. The woman nodded, then disappeared into the crowd. Jessica sat back, not with pride, but with peace. She realized in that moment that none of this had been about vengeance or even justice. It was about language, about changing the words women used for themselves, from accommodating to aware, from obedient to owner, and she didn't need a stage to keep changing it. She just had to live differently. Back at the cabin, winter thickened. The trees wore coats of snow. Scout slept deeper. Jessica began sketching the outline for her next book. Not a follow-up, something new. This one wouldn't be about what was taken. It would be about what was built. One night, curled up by the stove with Scout at her feet, she opened her journal, flipped back through the pages she'd written right after Brent locked her out. They were raw, bitter, tight with defense. She smiled. That woman had clawed her way back into herself. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She was someone else now. Not a survivor, not a speaker, not even a writer. Just a person, sitting in her own space with no keys dangling over her head. The fire popped softly. Scout stirred but didn't move. Jessica reached for her pen and wrote one line, underlined it twice. They locked me out, but that night they opened the real door.